Welcome to TYT Now. With me is Tim Mahalski, and we are going to start off this hour talking about the DREAM Act. A Pulitzer Prize winning journalist, Jose Vargas, just wrote a piece that ran in the New York Times, and let's watch this video.
I was born in the Philippines. I moved to the United States when I was 12. My mother wanted to give me a better life, so she sent me to live with my grandparents in Silicon Valley. I loved America the moment I got here. Embraced the language, the culture, the people. English was my second language, and I learned to speak American by watching Frasier, Home Improvement, and The Golden Girls. I won the spelling bee in 8th grade by spelling indefatigable. In high school, I fell in love with journalism. I started working for my local newspaper, the Mountain View Voice. Then I got hired at the Washington Post. I covered the 2008 presidential campaign, from traveling on Hillary Clinton's plane to pheasant hunting with Huckabee. I've interviewed Al Gore for Rolling Stone and profiled Mark Zuckerberg for The New Yorker. I even won a Pulitzer Prize for covering the Virginia Tech massacre. At age 16, I rode my bike to the DMV to get my driver's permit. I brought my green card with me. The woman at the DMV flipped it around. She leaned over and she whispered, "This is fake. Don't come back here again." I went home and confronted my grandfather. That was the first time I realized that I'm an undocumented immigrant. What some people call an illegal.
Okay, so two things about this. One, he's an illegal alien and a member of the press.
Yeah.
So cue right-wing rage, right?
Absolutely.
So now he's the new poster child for everything that's wrong with America.
Right.
He's not only a liar and a horrible person, but he also is an illegal immigrant.
Manipulated the
Get that?
system.
Right. But who
Right.
does the right wing hate more or love to vilify more than illegal aliens and the media? So
True.
we have a double whammy. The thing that's so heartbreaking about this, and that I think that the right-wingers especially do not understand and do not get, because I know that they like to have the Constitution in their pocket, but in that Constitution there is what's called the corruption of blood. And corruption of blood was a law that was, it was an English law that essentially if your father committed treason, you were liable for it. That your parents did something and then you were responsible for that. And that was such an egregious law and so horribly unfair that our founders decided that that was going to not be in our country, that we were going to be individuals, and so whatever our parents did not matter, and their sins would be washed away, and we would all be able to stand on our own, at least legally. This was before,
Right.
college debt. But, I digress. So now the DREAM Act was specifically geared towards these kids.
Yeah.
Who they didn't do anything wrong. They were brought here as children. And they've done everything right. Served in the military, gone to college, gotten good grades, become professionals. This guy won, like I said, he won a Pulitzer. He's done everything right. But his parents did something that was illegal and brought him here to this country without the proper papers. He didn't know that.
Right.
And now he is, this administration has deported more immigrants or illegal immigrants than the Bush administration.
Right.
Partly because we no longer have the jobs. We don't have the financial motivation to have them here. But this is a really emotional story for me.
If we, like we talked about before, so many Republicans like to bring up that, that the country is a business. And, if we've said many times it's not.
It's a charity.
However,
government is a charity.
And we want to talk in their terms. Wouldn't the DREAM Act and letting the people that were brought here illegally, born here illegally, whatever, wouldn't it make sense to let them become citizens, pay taxes? They went to college. That means they're going to get a job in the professional world. They're going to do something with their life that will eventually trickle back into the system through their tax dollars.
No,
which
you're absolutely right. That's attracting talent, and you want to have a business,
Right.
if we're calling, or even a charity. You want to have a business that attracts the best talent from around the world. And since
Right.
9/11, with our immigration policy, we've had a severe brain drain, and smart people are going other places. We used to have a country where smart people came here, innovated here, and had babies here.
Yeah.
It was a fantastic system, and now it's just no longer happening. So let's walk through the DREAM Act, because the DREAM Act, this is literally a dream of 10 years. It's bipartisan, a piece of legislation that would let these kids basically give amnesty to kids who were brought here illegally and are, for all intents and purposes, they're Americans.
Right.
What happened?
Well, I think it was about 6 months ago. The Senate voted it down.
Over Christmas. This was the crunch time that they were going. It was the war against Christmas.
Yeah, and a 55
against Christmas break.
55 to 41 vote. I wanted to point out the 5 Democrats though that voted no.
This is in the Senate.
Yes, in the Senate.
It passed in the House.
Ben Nelson of Nebraska, Mark Pryor of Arkansas, John Tester, Max Baucus, Kay Hagan, and then Joe Manchin did not vote on it. So
Right.
he might have been on vacation.
So this alleged supermajority,
not so much.
in the lame duck Congress, a bipartisan piece of legislation still died, and now we have a poster child coming out, or someone who bravely, and I don't even know if brave actually covers it. I mean, the amount of vitriol that he's had to endure, even from the likes of Jack Schaefer, who writes the column about the media for Slate.com. He's essentially has been comparing Vargas to a plagiarist and to fabricators because he lied about his immigration status in order to work at the Washington Post. I just disagree. I'm sorry. I've never been judged for what my parents did, not once. My parents are not particularly wonderful people, and I've never ever been judged by what they did. Because I grew up in America. I just find this whole thing to be deplorable. Let him be a citizen. He won a Pulitzer.
He's obviously done something right.
He's done something right. I think that I resent that the Republicans like to do this thing where they rail against government bureaucracy, and they don't want and how horrible and sluggish bureaucracy is in the government. And then as soon as it comes to immigration issues, rules are rules.
Yeah.
And they suddenly embrace bureaucracy and actually like it as a punishment for people who have just come here. So I just find this to be an incredibly emotional story, but also it's not feeling right. It's feeling like injustice. I don't like it.
Something else that isn't feeling right is a video that you found on John Huntsman talking we. You and I, if I said we, I would be talking about
we're getting ahead of
you and
ourselves.
I.
Let's talk. Since we're talking about immigration, let's talk about the economy.
Okay.
Okay. Robert Reich. There's a lot of people who think that they're economists. A lot of them are in the GOP. So we have Robert Reich here. He is promised in 2 minutes to tell us what is essentially up with our economy. Let's watch this.
What's the problem with the economy? Let me connect the dots and show you the big picture in less than 2 minutes, 15 seconds. Dot 1. Since 1980, the American economy has doubled in size. But adjusting for inflation, most people's wages have barely increased. Second dot. Where did all that money go? Almost all the gains have gone to the super rich. The top 1% used to take home about 10% of total income. Now it takes home more than 20%. And the super rich have 40% of the nation's entire wealth. The third dot. All this money at the top has given the super rich lots of political power, especially power to lower their tax rates. Before 1980, the top tax rate was over 70%. Now it's down to 35%. And much of their income is capital gains, subject to only a 15% tax. According to the IRS, the richest 400 Americans pay only 17%. Fourth dot. This means huge budget deficits. Tax revenues are down to less than 15% of the total economy, the lowest in 60 years. So public services are being cut at all levels of government. Our kids are being crowded into classrooms with more and more other children. Roads, bridges, levees, healthcare, safety nets, they're all being sacrificed. The fifth dot. Instead of joining together for better wages and jobs, many people are so scared that they're competing with other working people for the scraps that are left behind. So we get union versus non-union, public employee versus private, native-born versus immigrants. Final dot. The vast middle class, unable to borrow as it could before, no longer has the purchasing power needed to get the economy growing again, which means continued high unemployment and an anemic recovery. So you see the big picture? The only way we can have a strong economy is with a strong middle class.
Simple physics, something is too top heavy, it topples. So, I mean, and this is very clear. This has been happening over the last 20 years with supply side economics, where we have these magical job creators that if the rich become super rich, they're going to make everybody rich. And that just hasn't happened. The rich are even richer, and the rest of us are struggling even more than before.
And if we tax them, then they're going to end up leaving the country and going elsewhere.
No, they're the strongest people in the world, the magical people who can make jobs. But if we tax them, they'll wither and die instantly.
Right.
Right. So this is like just common sense legislation or common sense economic theory that has tons of real world proof, and then you have, we want to see this, then you have what the GOP thinks about the economy from this clip.
Once we unleash the energy of America's businesses and families and individuals, as we did in the 80s and 90s, a booming job market will reduce demand for government assistance, and rising incomes will increase federal revenues. In the 1980s, revenues to the federal government increased by 99%.
You cut taxes, and the tax revenues increase.
And the fact is the tax cuts have dramatically increased revenues.
Wrong, wrong, wrong. It just doesn't happen. And I actually interviewed a guy from the Heritage Foundation about this very issue.
Right.
Because he said that the Bush tax cuts, the first of three, were going to increase revenue because that's what they believe will happen. And in a perfect world, it does work like that. But they're not scoring for a perfect world. They're scoring for this one.
Right.
And that's never happened for maybe a brief period of time, but over the long haul, it doesn't. What happens is that the rich keep on getting richer, as we've seen over the last 30 years. We have now the super rich and people who, billionaires who are not paying the same tax rate as the middle class. And here you have a simple solution. If you build the middle class, if you have a strong middle of the economy, then everybody else does well.
And also, too, I mean, the proof is kind of in the pudding. If you presented an idea to me and said, oh, yeah, by the way, I have 10 years of failure, wouldn't you? But no, it works. It's the best idea ever.
We just need to wait longer for it to work.
Maybe another 5, 7 years.
You haven't given it another 30 years. And another 30 years, we're finally going to balance the budget. I mean, that's the Ryan tax plan, or the Ryan budget plan. It's like, oh, it's going to balance the budget, in 50-12. You're like, wait a second. Yeah. So eventually it will, and that's I mean it's so and they keep on doubling down on this, where the Bush tax cuts have continually been a huge fail. Huge fail. 3 times, it's been a failure, and now they're doubling down. Oh, if we just give more tax cuts, and that's what the Ryan budget has more tax cuts. It's a tax increase on normal people. A tax increase on normal people. Well, we deserve
it. I mean, we're not creating jobs. They are. So, right? Shouldn't they get the benefit of it?
Because they're magic. The magic unicorns. All right. So we're going to talk primaries because this is fun, and Republican primaries are the best because it's fun to see Republicans kind of cannibalize their own.
Keeps getting better and better.
Right. We had our first big debate, and now John Huntsman has thrown his hat into the ring. John Huntsman, who apparently the media loves because he's dreamy looking and he was an ambassador, so he has to be wonderful in every way. He worked for Obama, right? He's also, his father is the 47th richest man in the country, right?
He's probably creating a lot of jobs.
Right. Huntsman Chemicals, right? And he's also a high school dropout who dropped out of high school to play keyboards, which I think should be on all of his campaign literature. I think that's a fantastic little factoid. But he has this kind of weird, and this was a prepared speech. We're gonna watch this because no one else is talking about this. I think the media loves him too much. They're kind of fawning over him because he's so moderate, because he's not Rick Santorum. So let's watch what he says.
We live in a day and age, we have every opportunity to get out and talk. People will begin to know who we are. People will begin to understand how we feel. We're a great entrepreneurial family. We were one of the greatest job creating states. We created an environment. We didn't create jobs. Look at the jobs we created. Look at what we've done. I think we can probably be a little more aggressive.
We are not able to say I.
Yeah, it sounds like poor advice or just maybe he was nervous. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt. Maybe he was nervous about being on the
Maybe
Today
they were
Show.
Nervous.
Yeah,
they were nervous when they were talking because they were not coached not to say we so much when they really mean I. I mean, there's one thing to talk about your state as we. There's another thing to talk about yourself as we, and it kind of makes you sound weird. It's a little, I was like, well, maybe that's something that you do when you're a diplomat.
What it made me think of is recently one of my friends just told me that his wife was pregnant, and he said, "We're pregnant," and I thought.
Well, but that's true. I mean, but that's permissible. Like when you say, like, my state, we thought this, that makes sense. But it's still my state. We thought this. That's not what he did. He was just like, and we did this, and we thought this was a good idea. And when he really meant, so it's he's an they are all inclusive. John Huntsman, they are great, and they are Mormon, and they are running for president. Aren't they handsome and not Romney? All right.
They might win.
Right. They apparently are going to win and going to be the next, they're going to be president. And it would be really weird to have, a person on, well, whatever. Moving on. Okay, I have a beef.
Uh-oh.
This is really bothering me. I want to walk you through this and see if you can. This is again another candidate. So this is someone running for president.
Okay.
Of the United States of America, or wanting to get the Republican nomination. Went to Regent University, which just so happens to be one of the lowest rated law schools that a lot of Bush appointees miraculously came out of.
Shocking.
Worked in the IRS as an attorney, like went and collected taxes for the government after going to this, very low-rated law school that Bush cronies came out of. Father-in-law of this person got $250,000 in ethanol subsidies for his farm, right?
Needed.
Which is also socialized, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So working for the government, taking taxes, people in the family totally happy about
Sounds like
farm
big
subsidies.
government.
Right. Huge government.
Huge.
Okay. Then had 23 foster children, which is the government giving you money to take care of children that no one else wants.
Even bigger government.
Yes, it's a people who are foster children are kids that no one else in the country or no one else in the world wants to take care of them. So they end up in the state, right? This is quite literally the nanny state. And this person, no problem, took advantage of this, took the money, took care of these 23 children, and is now working for the federal government full-time.
Government
employee full-time in Washington, D.C. Wow. But, okay, this person also rails against, wait for it, socialism, and is the darling of the Tea Party. We're talking about Michelle Bachmann, who is the most socialist person on the face of the planet. Like, how is this? She talks about the nanny state like it's a bad thing, like it's not what happens in her home. How does this happen? Explain this to me, Tim.
Ooh, wow. I wish I could explain that to you. Maybe she's trying to, maybe she feels like she could fight the fight because she is everything she's fighting. You know what I mean? She's fighting the Democrats and people who want big government because she was part of it, and so now she knows exactly how it works.
So she's like the reformed sinner?
Right, exactly.
She's like, she's having a religious moment in a strip club?
Yeah, basically, I would say that's the best analogy for her.
So she knows what is wrong with the country because it's her?
Yeah, because she has participated in every program that needs to be cut. You know, we need to shrink government. She should have, all of the government programs that she was involved in need to be gone now that she doesn't need them anymore.
Right, so she has the experience
Yeah.
to really be a benefit to the Tea Party. All right, good enough for me.
I think that's the logical explanation for, we're trying to rationalize with the irrational.
All right, that, well said.
Tina, so you had the honor of getting to view Sarah Palin's movie before it comes out for all of us commoners in July. And the most shocking thing that I found about your Atlantic piece was that Stephen Bannon made this film for people like you?
Yeah, that's what he kept on saying. He said, I'm making this film for people like you, and I couldn't figure out what that meant. And it turns out that he was making... He is under the assumption, which is probably correct when it comes to things other than politics, that women have the purchasing power in this country. And so if you get the female vote, if you get the people who supported Hillary and didn't like how she was treated during the primaries, and you get these what he calls new agenda women,
okay,
which is conservatives, conservative women. If you secure those votes, then that's it. Then you're on to the nomination, no problem. So when he said he made this movie for me, he made it for essentially females.
Oh, okay. It kind of sounds like he's marketing an infomercial. But the thing that I thought was interesting is that you mentioned...
I don't know. I think infomercials are a bit more critical of their products.
No, you mentioned that there's a lot of buzzwords in the movie, talking about movies or words that'll make you walk out of the movie thinking that Sarah Palin is this.
I didn't use the word buzz. I said that it's like SEO, like search engine optimization for movies. That they're essentially Republican dog whistles, where you have the same words that are repeated over and over again. So you have things like a CEO, kitchen table, ethics, principles, and threat to the establishment. So you walk out of there and you're like, oh, her ethics and principles are what make her a threat to the establishment because she's the CEO of her kitchen table. Right. So, and when I asked him about that, I mean, I saw the film and then I interviewed him about that, the following day, and he was like, "Wow, no one's actually said that before." And I was like, "Okay, was it strategic?" And he said, "Well, it was thought through." Was the phrase that he used, and this was something that he really wanted to do to sway people's opinions of Sarah Palin.
After you saw the movie, what do you think this movie is going to accomplish for Sarah Palin, or what is it going to do negatively for Sarah Palin?
Well, I don't think this is her first attempt to kind of revamp her image. I think that Bristol being on Dancing with the Stars was an attempt to kind of make the two of them America's sweethearts.
Okay.
So this was mainstream America. This was a very, very broad audience of people who maybe aren't that involved in politics, but would like to see, but could be swayed on their opinion of Sarah Palin. And so Bristol, who was not a good dancer, had absolutely no merit whatsoever. Without merit, was advanced to other levels.
Yeah.
And then anybody who took umbrage with that was called a hater. And that dynamic, very similar to Sarah Palin in politics, caused people who might have been neutral on her before to not like her for that reason. So it was like, she's getting ahead for absolutely no reason. She was, she's not a very good dancer, but she still, for some reason, was getting voted ahead. And I think that that was a real backlash, and it didn't do what she was hoping to accomplish hoping that it would accomplish. And I believe that this documentary is going to probably have the same effect, because if you go in and if you're going to try and sell someone on something, you want to talk about what they think about them. And when I talked to Bannon, he believes that the reason why they don't like Sarah Palin is because they differ with her on policy.
Okay.
Which is not true.
No.
At all. Policy has nothing to do with it. It is all about, if she were more competent, she would be less controversial, period. I mean, the press wouldn't have anything to giggle about. There wouldn't be any controversy. She'd be pretty boring if if she actually belonged in this.
Didn't write on her hand and things like that.
Right, or mess up who Paul Revere was warning. I mean, that was a flub.
What news sources she reads.
Right. I mean, and conversely, if a man would have given Katie the answers that she gave to Katie Couric, no one would be trying to make a film touting her record in a tiny, as the governor of a tiny state for a fraction of a term. A man would never get treated like this. So it's almost like this reverse discrimination. And women who are smart and accomplished, and a lot of them have gotten back to me after I wrote this piece and told me that they feel like, they're being condescended to when they're told that Sarah Palin's smart and accomplished.
Right. Which totally makes sense.
Right. So I think if you don't know why people don't like Sarah Palin, then you kind of make this film that really doesn't address the issues with Sarah Palin, which is not, we don't know her. And, he really thinks that the reason why we don't like her is because we don't know her. And it's like, well, she's written 2 books about her life, and she hasn't gotten out of the media spotlight. I mean, basically, the media has been obsessed about her for the past 3 years. How do we not know her?
Can you explain to me this? The one question I have about this is how you can be undefeated when you've lost and walked away and quit. Can you explain that? I mean, I played sports growing up and in high school. Then it makes no sense to me because undefeated would mean that you have a winning record.
All right. So I asked that exact question, right? I asked that exact question, and and Bannon kind of he started busting my chops. He's like, I thought you worked for the Atlantic. I thought you were smarter than that. Yeah, I mean, he was like, he feigned insult at the question. But he said that it was because all this stuff she's gone through, and she is it just doesn't bother her, and it's like water off a duck. And so I was like, wait a second, that's not defeated. I mean, it's either untrue or bad grammar, and I don't know which, but it's not. Undeterred is not undefeated. It's not defeated. So. Yeah, that's exactly. I thought that it was also compared at the end. It compares her to Reagan, which I took issue with because I think that if she's like anything, she's much more like a Barry Goldwater than she's a Reagan. Period. But that being beside the issue, I think that the comparison of the two kind of is part of the revamping effort.
So this just kind of, so from now on, if you're a sports team or, a politician.
And you quit, you can be undefeated.
Yeah, just not letting it hold you back.
Yes.
And having a positive feeling about it.
Right, exactly. If you're undeterred, you can now be undefeated. God bless America. Yeah, it's pretty bizarre. But, I mean, it was fascinating. I mean, and his publicist said not to meet with me.
Oh.
Yeah, she's like, oh, don't meet with her because she wrote something critical of Palin, and I
something or some things.
Right. I was like, really? What have you read? Have you seen my show?
Yeah, which one?
But I think that but I mean, he likes politics. I mean, we had a good time talking about politics. It was fun. I admire him for sitting down and talking with me. I thought that it was great. So, and it's a fun piece on the Atlantic about Sarah Palin, the undefeated. So, do we actually have our interview? Okay. Excellent. All right. Now with us on the phone is Los Angeles Times reporter Mark Barabak. Hey, Mark, how are you?
I'm fine and dandy. How are you?
Good. Thanks for joining us. So I wanted to ask you this because I saw your piece in the LA Times this morning, and you've been covering the primaries, and I'm having a lot of fun following. Who is this mythical A-lister that the GOP is waiting for to be their candidate, to be their darling of 2012?
Well, see, that's the beauty part. It changes. It once upon a time, it was, depending how far back you want to go, it was Jim Huntsman. Then for a while, it was, I don't know. I guess for a while it was Chris Christie, and then for a while it was Mitch Daniels, and now it's Rick Perry, and if Perry gets in, it'll probably be, I don't know, Jeb Bush or so. I mean, that's the thing. It's like a unicorn. You know what I mean? It's there. It's been spotted, but presidential candidates are a lot like used cars. I mean, not used cars, new cars. The instant you drive it off the lot, it's devalued. It loses. And the same with presidential candidates. They love you until you get in, and then they start looking for the next, who's going to be the party savior. And it should be said, with the exception of Democrats in 2008 who were pretty happy with Obama and Hillary, you see the same thing on the Democratic side. People always want the candidate who's not running.
Right. Familiarity breeds contempt.
Yeah, and it's sort of this mythical thing because, when people are just talking about you, it's all the upside, know, and then a candidate gets in and they realize that it's not all upside. There's the downside, there's this, there's that. So, again, it's a power game. And it should be said, political writers feed this. I mean, political writers are a lot like 8-year-old children. You can have a room full, spoiled 8-year-old children, I should say. You can have a room full of toys, but they always want the one that's in the window. And as soon as they get it, they play with it for about 10 minutes and they're bored with it. And political writers are very much the same.
Right. So walk us through why Romney and now John Huntsman are deciding to opt out of Iowa.
Well, I think there's different cases. There's different reasons. I think Huntsman just is getting in fairly late, and there's a lot of organizational effort that goes into Iowa. The straw poll, which is in August, the caucus is very, very labor intensive. I mean, just to step back for a second, the caucuses require you to get thousands of people to go out on a freezing cold January night and spend 2 or 3 hours arguing about politics with their neighbors. A certain class of folks will do that, but most normal people won't. And so it really takes a lot of effort to get those people out. A lot of effort, a lot of money, it should be said. In Romney's case, look, he fought very hard in Iowa and spent a lot of money and a lot of effort and finished second there the last time. I think what Romney's doing is not taking part in this straw poll, which is sort of as I described in the paper, sort of it's one half carnival circus and one half organizational dry run for the caucuses. I think he just decided that he doesn't need Iowa the way he did last time. He's the front runner. He's a national candidate. So he's opting out of it for that reason. But I think my strong sense is that Romney, in the end, is going to compete in Iowa. Huntsman said flat out he's not going to go there and he's not going to compete at all.
Yeah, it's bizarre. It's like, it's the two Mormons who are opting out of Iowa, which is...
Yeah, although I wouldn't ascribe too much to that. I mean, yes, the Christian right, as it's called, is a very powerful and influential force in Iowa. But if you look at South Carolina, that's also a state where the religious right has a lot of clout, and you don't see either of them opting out of South Carolina. So I don't think it's a Mormon thing so much as them having the reasons that I talked about. And I should point out, too, that both of them, there is going to be a Fox News debate just a few days before the straw poll. Even though they're not going to participate in that August 13th straw poll, Romney and Huntsman have both said they will, in fact, be in Iowa at the debate.
Speaking of which, what happened to Gary Johnson?
Who? No,
exactly.
Well,
that's exactly. But he was kind of fun.
Disparaging the former governor of New Mexico.
Yes,
but
correct.
Look, there are a lot of candidates who are running who I think we can safely say probably aren't going to be the nominee, much less the next president of the United States. So, you have candidates who run because they want to get a message out, because, it increases their the fee they can charge perhaps on the electoral circuit, and maybe they do it because they don't have anything better to do with their time.
Yeah, look, Rick Perry, if you watch him, just, go and see one of his speeches. He looks like Josh Brolin playing George W. in the movie W. Like he looks like a parody of George W.
I would not discount him as a campaigner. I mean, I was in Texas. I wrote about his race against Kay Bailey Hutchison, and it was one of these things where on paper, Perry was cooked. No one had ever served for governor. No one had ever been elected 3 terms as Texas governor. Kay Bailey Hutchison was the most popular politician in the state, 75% approval rating. Everyone loved Kay Bailey Hutchison. Perry was old. He was worn out. He was tired. And he campaigned hard, and he kicked her butt. And I'm not saying whether he would be a good or a bad president or has been a good or a bad governor, but he is, I will tell you, a very, very effective campaigner.
And that's what it's going to need. Mark Baerback, LA Times reporter, thank you so much for calling in.
Well, thanks for having me. Take care.
All right, we have
the best part of the show.
Our favorite part, Santorumism. It's a Rick Santorum way of speaking, where you have where you say something incredibly clueless but also condescending. This comes from when he said of John McCain, who was a POW for 5 years, that John McCain just doesn't understand enhanced interrogation. So we thought that was hilarious. And so we've been asking you guys to come up with what we're calling Santorumisms, which again, clueless statement coupled with something that's also incredibly condescending, and you guys have come through. Take it away, Tim. What do you got?
My favorite so far is Grimward Wow said, the Young Turks just doesn't understand YouTube videos.
Very nice. We have Joe Flett said, Canadians just don't understand hockey.
Or someone made sure to point out you and I. They said Viper718XX said Tina Dupuis doesn't understand politics, and Erica Bateson said Tim just doesn't understand hosting, which I didn't know if it was a Santorumism or an insult.
I thought that was a nice compliment. I like that. Okay, Benjamin Bug said Michael Jordan just doesn't understand baseball. Oh, I'm sorry, basketball. I'm not really a sports person, but I'm sure he doesn't understand baseball, so that would be a truism, but it's a Santorumism if it's basketball.
What about Dizzy Masakella said, J.K. Rowling just doesn't understand storytelling.
There you go.
Doesn't.
Nathan Katz actually came through with a bunch of them. Zombies just don't like brains. Republicans just don't understand gay sex. Thank you. Goths just don't understand black.
They don't. What about Tanfila said, women just don't understand childbirth.
There you go. Andy Hunt, Mormons just don't understand polygamy.
What about Dangerously Talented said, in Russia, vodka doesn't understand you.
All right, we had, and I'm sorry, I'm gonna totally botch your name, but it's Graman das Corvez. You can botch my name all you want. He says Europeans just can't understand free health care.
Muslim Mina said 08 said President Bush just doesn't know how to start wars.
There you go. All right, I have. Then we have Evan Wilkinson says Jews just don't understand Israel. Love that. I actually think Santorum actually said that. That could have happened.
Walfo5 said Mel Gibson just doesn't understand anti-Semitism. Which he doesn't.
This is pretty much, this one like really knocks it out of the park, and this is a personal friend of mine, Carol Davidson, who ran the blog, and I'm not making this up, Falafel Sex and other things better left unsaid. Just a little shout out to Bill O'Reilly. To really have, but this is great. She said Santorum just doesn't understand the Google bomb. Google his name and figure that one out. Yeah, there you go. Thanks for that. So if you have one, send it to us on our Facebook, Twitter, whatever, email, you got us, and we'll read them on the air. Thanks for sending those in, guys. For more, check us out on Twitter and Facebook at TYT Now.